Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Rise. And today I have with me Paul Stobbs, and he is also the podcast host of Understanding Conspiracies. He's an internet theologian, I would like to say, of his own pseudo church. We'll get into that. And it's actually really good information. I've looked into him quite well, and that's why I wanted him on. And so he's also writing a book, or have you finished the book? I know you were in the midst of a book. So, Paul, I'll let you take.
Oh, well, excellent. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I am actually writing a book currently on this topic we're going to discuss today of the Nephilim having clown-like features and where the origin of a clown costume truly comes from, its occult roots within secret societies, and its use as a tool for the purposes of channeling spirits, otherwise known as the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Volume 1 Volume 1 is about to be published in a couple of months on Amazon. Volume 2 will be released in a year's time. And Volume 1 is called The History. Volume 2 will be called The Now. And it's two very similar books on the same theme, but two very distinct understandings of where the Nephilim come from and how the secret societies hijacked the symbol of a clown and turned it into something they use as a tool. That's the history. The now will be about how it's still used today in modern media for the same purposes these ancestor spirit cult worship cultures use it still today in their own ritualistic practices. So two different books there. Volume 1's being released soon, so that's exciting, and I'm getting a bit nervous, pre-publishing nerves, but that's what I'm doing currently. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And with drug use and opening doors, which I'm well versed in. I'm a nurse as well. I'm a registered nurse. And we actually had a problem with our son that he did so many psychedelics that he went into psychosis for a year and had a very scary situation on the other side. And we truly believe he had an attachment that came back with him and kind of hijacked him for a minute. He wasn't functional.
Mm.
So very interesting with the work that you talk about, because I know that you relate that same sort of thing. And I'll let you take the floor on that with, the different ways that they use to, I guess, channel here. Right. So
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that happened.
he's okay now, by the way,
Good, good.
everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's something
Yes.
it's something I've had experience with myself in a big way. As a listener of my work, you probably know I've talked about this quite openly and quite a lot. But my history, my past, is somebody who was into the psychedelic consciousness exploration world. So I already came at all this research with a base knowledge or an understanding that there is a spiritual realm where entities do exist. From personal experience, I know this to be the case. So there was no issue for me to make these connections quite brazenly and openly and honestly. And in many ways, my work is like a love letter or a cry to those still in that world to ask them to please understand that what they're dealing with, these entities, are not reflections of some sort of humanity's collective unconsciousness trying to teach you wisdoms, but it's actually yourself talking back to you or something, or it's not, ascended masters or us from the future or aliens or any of these things that they claim to be. They're actually very real, tangible entities that are there for a specific reason that can be understood through the biblical lens. And that's what I lay out on my work more so than ever. And it's been a wild ride, I'm not gonna lie, and the reactions I get from these people are first it's like denial and rejection. But then usually about a year later they come back to me saying, okay, what you've said is very serious, I get it now, and thank you for showing it to me, is usually what I end up getting like a year later.
Mhm.
Because I know what it sounds like on the surface. I know what the Nephilim look like clowns sounds like. It sounds nuts. It
Well
really does.
well, if they don't get into it, right? If they
Yeah,
take it at face value and do 15-second search, you're not gonna get there. So, yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yes, and that's hard, I'm sure, in your past, but I think the history of clowns, and especially as it applies to like the Ringling Brothers, and you get into, secret societies and different things, and I'll let you kind of touch on that.
Mhm.
Going back to, I think it was Charles Dibdin is the one that first started with that. So,
Yes, so a good place to start with this theory is the facts, the historical documented receipts that prove that yes, a clown as we know it today is quite literally a model of demons, and two distinct types, both Western and Eastern demons throughout history. So I'll explain the history of the clown, and then maybe we can get into the metaphysics of the biblical history and why the clowns or the Nephilim did look like clowns afterwards. But
right.
so the foundation is that clowning as we know it, modern clowns today with the red hair, white skin, multicolored clothes, on unicycles, honking horns, that's a relatively modern invention over the past maybe 100 to 200 years. Prior to that, that image of a clown didn't really exist as we know it today. However, clowning or comedic characters have always been around throughout history since humanity has existed. There's always been funny people. And I think I need to make it clear, a distinction I need to make clear, which some people seem to latch onto quite early in my research and seem to think I'm talking about being a clown. So acting like a
Mm,
clown is a part of my theory, and really it's not. I'm strictly dealing with aesthetics here and the way things look. It's not about acting like a joker or a fool. It's about looking
mhm.
like one, is what I'm trying to say here, because it's about how you dress and what you reflect in the spirit realm that's important, not necessarily how you act. So, funny people have always been
Right.
around, thousands of years. There's always been jesters for kings since the pharaoh times. You know what I mean? There's always,
For
and
sure.
yeah, exactly. And always, and though that will always be the case since humans have been around. There's always been comedians. So leave them to one
Right.
side, and let's start going into the medieval. Just prior to the medieval period, we'll go to the collapse of Rome, early Greek theatre from Aristophanes into the Roman theatres and the mimes and the mimics of that time. Now, there's always been characters throughout Roman and Greek theatre who wear masks and usually mock or imitate influential figures in society in order to satirize them for laughs, and that's kind of the first proto version of clowning as a Western sense we ever have. And the masks they wore were quite grotesque, over exaggerations of features with long pointed noses, big wide grins, wrinkles really accentuated, and they basically represented stock characters that people would recognize quite easily. The soldier, the poor person, the daughter of the rich man, or the rich industrialist, or something like that. Just generic, yeah, generic characters that anybody could
Mm,
recognize, and they would have some fun with it. They would do improv shows. But when Rome kind of dissipated and collapsed from its old empire, and the new Roman Catholicism kind of took over, acting was kind of seen as like perverse and like being a prostitute in a way, like whoring yourself
mm,
out or your character, not being honest. It was considered something that liars would do, and it was frowned upon. So they kind of had to leave the Rome as a vicinity, these actors, and quite a lot of them did end up becoming jesters for kings, because even though it was made kind of illegal, just more of a taboo than illegal, the king still, who's going to question a king? He was allowed to have his funny man and his personal actors,
right.
and so were the rich, influential people. So jesters kind of came about as a result of that. And what did these actors do? These mimics, these mimes, they mimicked the king. So jesters are dressed
Mm,
like a king. That's what they're doing, and they became, confidants or personal advisors, and quite close to the rulership often, if not considered just an absolute fool there for comedic purposes. Sometimes they were actually quite serious advisors to kings. So there's something to be said for a character who's of that form influencing a king. So we could
mhm,
leave that as to one side for now, but that is interesting as a side note. But jesters, again, really aren't anything to do with Nephilim in the sense that I'm talking
right.
about, from the old fashioned sense of where we get jesters from. Where we need to focus our attention is to what the other actors did who didn't become jesters. Well, they had to travel Europe, you see, through a movement called the Commedia dell'arte. And it was basically just traveling troops of actors putting on quick performances in town squares in any village they came across. Quick improvisation show wearing the masks, which represented the stock characters, and then people would have a laugh, chuck some money at them in a hat, they'd pack up and move on and go to the next village. And that was the tradition for quite literally 1,000 years, from 500 AD to 1600 AD, that Dark Ages period, is what this troupe was
Mm,
doing, developing their craft and kind of perfecting it along the way. And the routines kind of became quite formalized over that 1,000 years. There was things that were expected of the characters for them to do. There were certain jokes and routines that were expected to happen, as you could naturally understand when you've been doing this thing over and over again through the families for thousands of years, you know. But they traveled from, you know, the coasts of Portugal all the way across to the tips of Russia. They covered a huge expanse of land and brought their performances with them. And it became so wildly popular that France established their own theatre versions of the pantomime, or the harlequinades, which they became known as, and so did Britain in their own theatres. In fact, all throughout Europe, it became a standard theatre show as well as this travelling show. But along their travels, this troupe did pick up a new character, which only became an addition in the early 1600s, and this is called Harlequin. So people imagine Harlequin to be always have been there, but it wasn't. It was quite a late addition to this whole movement. It took 1,000 years from the collapse of Rome to even to become a character. The Italians called him Arlecchino, and the French called him Harlequin. So that's kind of where we get that from.
Mm.
So Harlequin is actually also named after a giant of France, which was
Oh.
witnessed by a 10th century monk who documented this town, claiming he saw a wild man, giant hairy beast with a club and his band of demons just roaming through this village and destroying it and then going to the next place. And he survived and he witnessed this horror, you know, and they called it the Wild Hunt. And it's this ancient European mythos of this band of demons that come around every year and just destroy everything. And their leader
Mm.
is a giant. So the giants are the Nephilim of the ancient past. I think your audience may be very well aware of that, and so are you. So this is the Europeans' flavour. This is their flavour of Nephilim, okay, and their mythos. And that was called Helikins, funnily enough, that version, the French version, and that's where Harlequin also got its influence for its name from. Helikins, Harlequin, Arlecchino. Harlequin himself is a very odd blend of these northern European wild, hairy beast, giant men themes, kind of slapped together with the southern Mediterranean Greek, Roman, Greco mythos of Thyrsis, of Dionysus and his staff, or Mercury with his staff and his wings and his fleet of foot, messenger of the gods. They kind of slap those two things together and you get Harlequin, who's quick-witted, fast fleet of foot, backflipping, somersaulting character with magical powers who could slap the stage with his slapstick and cause it to change instantly. So he was a demonic, powerful, godlike entity in its early introduction, but he was mimicked and dressed in multicolored patch fur with a beast mask covered in hair as well. Quite brutish and
Mm.
actually quite terrifying looking when you look at some of the modern images of people wearing these old masks. It's really scary. He wasn't like
Yeah.
it wasn't a fun looking thing, and the way he like moved his body was creepy. You know, like when you see those films
Mm.
where they twitch their limbs in weird directions and
Oh,
just
yeah.
didn't have human motion. That's Harlequin in his original
Interesting.
form. He moved in such a strange, uncanny uncanny is the word. Like it's disturbing to look at. It's like that's weird. You know, that's like when
Mm.
they walk backwards on the hands and the feet in the horror movies. Like it's just
Yeah.
that doesn't look right
Not
to us.
it's not right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what he did, and that was the point. He was
Mm.
supposed to represent the demonic influence in the play. He added that wild card attitude to the whole performance, and he became a leading role because of it. Because of he was so wild, you know, and he was meant to be wild because
Mm.
he is literally modeled after the wild men of Europe, the giant hairy beast
Ah.
men of Europe, the Nephilim of Europe. So that's Harlequin. Now Harlequin was cast as a servant, zany character. He was a comedian. He was meant to be funny, and his foil was the servant of the rich man. So he was a servant of the rich man, but the rich man had another servant called Pedrolino. So Pedrolino just wore plain white Elizabethan rags with a bit of a floppy ruff around his neck. Nothing special, a bit of a floppy hat, but wasn't an outstanding character, just dressed in all white. And he contrasted Arlecchino with his multicolored,
Mm.
fractal patterned, crazy clothing, you know. And he was always chasing after Harlequin because Harlequin would steal the daughter of the rich man and run away with them.
Mm.
And then Pedrolino and the rich
Sounds
man,
familiar.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, Pedrolino and the rich man would be like, okay, let's go get them. And that's the fun. That's the comedy. Chasing after them, trying to get them back, you know. And as Harlequino would jump through windows and do comedic somersaults all over the place to try and escape with the woman he stole, basically. The rich man would chase after his daughter with his trusty Pedrolino servant following him. So that's kind of the routine that became popular, and that became known as the Harlequinade, or a key part of the pantomime show in the Britain as well. A pantomime is like a 4-hour epic of drama, and then a harlequinade at the end where they have this hour chase scene, like Looney Tunes style chase scene I just described
Mm.
there. So that's where we get the first proto version of anything you could consider a clown like character in Harlequin. But over 200 years of development from the 1600s, he changed dramatically. He stopped being so wild and wacky and brutish and rude and crude, because his stick, he would pretend it was a phallus and he would stick it up people's
Oh.
backsides and he would pretend to masturbate with it. You know, he would do crude, horrible, rude things to make the audience blush. But he kind of became a bit more posh, a bit more of a dandy, you know, a bit more of a fancy boy about town with a quick wit and sharp intellect rather than this brutish wild card. And he kind of, I suppose, in a
Mm.
way, you could describe it as he got boring, and his
Mm.
outfit got tighter. He
They
got
knew his tricks.
more, he got more colourful, more uniform diamond shapes. His hat changed from a mask to a more of a masquerade, sleek Zorro type
Mm.
mask with his hat. Where he started to develop a hat which was like a sailor's hat, so he was like a military man, more refined, you know, more
Mm.
of a refined character, and it became kind of just old hat, you know, and it was boring for a lot of people. People were sick of Harlequin eventually. It's like, oh, this is nothing, you know. But
Mm.
during that time where he was changing to become a bit more bland, clown was starting to become a thing in Britain. So clown is actually the word. It's like a British slang, old English slang word for clodhopper or fool or moron,
Oh.
you know, and that's kind of where clown got its colloquial name for a particular character in the British versions of this Italian tradition. So in British theatre, they had the pantomime, they had the harlequinade, and the clown character of Britain was like a loud drunk who wanted to drink all the time, steal sausages, and wasn't a very good servant. His master, he didn't really care about doing what his master told him to do, and when he did do it, he did a half-assed job, and that was the comedy. You know, he wasn't very good at anything, but he only cared about himself. And this actually kind of reflects the really old Greco Aristophanes characters of the first clowns. We're going way back here now to, like, you know, 300, 200 AD, around this time, maybe even earlier. But these old Attic theatre shows, they had something called a parasite, and that was the very, very first type of clown in theatre as we know it. It didn't look like a clown, but it was basically a person who would eat the food that was left at the altars of the gods. He wouldn't consider anything
Mm.
sacred. He was considered a gluttonous parasite. And in a way, this British clown was the same. He only cared about himself, fulfilling his desires and needs, which is food and alcohol, and he
Mm.
liked just messing with people and watching them squirm. That was the modern British version of Pedrolino. Pedrolino as an Italian plain white garb. Pedrolino in the French tradition became Poirot, and Poirot is a really sad, low energy clown who's always crying and really expressive, sad frowns, you know, and he was always upset because Harlequin, you know, stole Columbine, the daughter of the rich man, and Columbine loved Harlequin. Why didn't Columbine love me, Poirot? Oh, woe is me, you know. It's kind of a sad sack,
Mm.
pathetic excuse for a man, basically, you know. And that was the comedy, you know, and it was very distinctly French comedy when you think about it. It was that you could tell that's, you know, it was French from the get go. But Britain just had a different attitude about that character, about Pedrolino. To them, he was just he was a nut job, just a loud, drunk
Mm.
nut job, laugh a second, wacky Looney Tunes cartoon character. And the costume of the British clown saw that reflection in character very much like the original Harlequin. Like this new British clown acted like Harlequin was originally when he first was introduced in the 1600s. So he kind of replaced Harlequin and knocked him off the pedestal, and the British clown became the new leading wild card demonic role. And with that switch in character came a costume change for Pedrolino, or the British clown, and it wasn't a plain white costume anymore. It was this psychedelic, multicolored, fractaled, patterned, weird looking dress thing, which is just
Mm.
wild with pale white makeup, wild, crazy, wacky coloured wigs, multicoloured like patches all over the face, and it was just completely unlike anything that had ever come before. And you look through the memoirs of how this happened exactly, and no one ever explains the specific inspiration for this new costume. But we can infer a few things and figure out where it came from, and that's kind of what I've done with my work on my channel. That's what I'm going to explain to you here now. So, at
Awesome.
at this time, about 1799, roughly, somebody called Charles Dibdin Jr. had taken over Sadler's Wells Theatre, where these pantomimes were happening on a regular basis, and where they were highly popular and sought after by the public. Now, he was hired as a new playwright and a showrunner, so he didn't own the theatre, but the guy who owned the theatre, Richard Hughes, hired him to basically run the place and make the shows happen and make the money, you know. And it was Charles Dibdin Jr. who decided to change the costume of a clown, and it's said to make his mark on the industry is why he did this, because it's never been done before. The costume's been the same for 1,000 years. This guy
Mm.
comes in and just changes everything. It was crazy. Everyone was like, "What's going on here? I have to come and see this new costume." And from that day on, after these first performances with this new costume, it became the industry standard, and that's where we get modern clown costumes from. This initial incursion, where suddenly the costume changed dramatically. Anyway, Charles Dibdin Jr. was the son of a prominent, famous musician and Freemason called Charles Dibdin Sr. Yeah, not very. They're not. They're not very. They're not very creative with the names back then. It's just the way it was, you know.
It could have been the second, right?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. So there you go. So his father was actually a Freemason member of the Leicestershire Lodge number 2429, and you can find booklets dedicated to him from that lodge written in the 1930s. You know, and he wrote a lot of famous songs for the British military, which were sung by the sailors. He was equated with being the guy who kind of saw Britain through the battles into victory by keeping the morale of the soldiers up through the songs he wrote. You know, he was a very well respected, well renowned, famous person of the time, and his plays were written and performed in all these theatres. His songs were sung even at the proms, even today in Britain, which is an
Mm.
orchestral event every year. His song is the closing song called Tom Bowling, dedicated to his brother who died in India while trying to colonize the place. So it's kind of he's still famous today. He's still there in the
Wow.
annals of history of British history as a songwriter. And he was a prominent Freemason who was very well connected to India. Like I said, his brother was there. He traveled back and forth quite a lot during the colonization attempts. He was even going to live there, but you can find through the
Mm.
memoirs of his son that he didn't go because bad weather. Basically, it was too rainy to set sail, and he basically chickened out and said, "Oh, I'll just stay in England instead. And I'll just keep doing my thing here, you know." But he was going to move to India. He loved it that much, and I do believe he brought back with him a lot of Indian iconography to do with Rakshasa demons, specifically from the temples in these regions. And if you look at a Rakshasa demon, it's identical in costume to what they modelled the new clown in. It's just the exact same
Mm.
dress. You've seen the images on my channel. I've laid it out
Mm-hmm.
quite clearly.
Yes.
It's uncanny how you can clearly see the guy just saw that, drew it or
Right.
something, or took I don't know what they did then. They didn't have photographs, but he somehow maybe got a model or something or a little figure, brought it back, showed me. He must have showed his son, and his son must have gone,
Mhm.
"Aha! I've got it." And that's what he dressed the new clown like. Okay, and you put them side by side.
It's
They've even
yeah.
been drawn in the same position these demons are in on the temples with his arms in the air doing the handstand. It's identical through it with the head turned up and everything. Okay, and it's kind of like
Mm.
you can now clearly see what the new costumes inspiration was from. It's not historically
Right.
documented, but it's your eyes will not deceive you once you see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear. So Harlequin, first proto clown introduced, modelled after the Europeans' flavour of Nephilim, the wild man, later superseded by the British clown with its new costume, which was also modelled after the Indian flavour of Nephilim in the Rakshasa. So both costumes both roots of the clowns are heavily seeped in demonic iconography, historically speaking.
Mhm.
So yes, clowns quite literally do look like Nephilim. That's not even
All
like
right.
I can't even like argue about that in any other sense. So now we need to explain, well, why do the Nephilim look like this is where we can go from there. So, but there you go. Any
Mm,
questions? I'll stop there. I talked for quite a
perfect.
while, but that's the basic history there.
Uh, no, no, this is perfect and pretty much down the line of where I was going to go with it anyway. So this is great.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Right. So from there we can probably go into just a quick brief summary of circuses. They can't really be left
Hmm.
out of this if we're talking about clowns. And from the British theatres from that time, there was an expansionist movement happening out west in the Americas, and British people went over there and brought the circus tradition with them. But the circuses couldn't really be in theatres, these shows, because it was a constantly moving audience. Like I said, expansionist, constant movement. The railways were being laid, so a new method was made where it would become a lot like the Commedia dell'arte, a travelling circus under a temporary tent. And a lot of this was involved with many characters throughout the history, but it didn't really get fully solidified and formalized until P.T. Barnum got involved, who was a very rich um, con artist is the best way to describe this guy. I couldn't describe him as anything else, really. He made all of his money by scamming people, first with lottery scams until they became illegal in the region he was in because the priests got involved. Then he made a newspaper to try and lambast the priests who were trying to put in these new laws. And he was a real charlatan of a guy. And when he realized he'd lost all his money through his lottery scams,
Mm.
he moved on to create, well, first he bought a black slave who was blind and couldn't walk, and then claimed that she was the original long living slave of George Washington, and made money from people coming to see her.
Oh,
I know it's really weird, right? And then when she died and he got enough money from exploiting her, he went on to then start a museum where he would then put on loads of hoaxes, his museum full of strange curiosities,
curiosity.
and he basically sold like a fish head onto the body of a monkey, or some the other way around. I can't. A monkey head onto the body of a fish, and said, "Come see the real mermaid." And people travelled from all over the world to see these supposed spectacular, strange oddities when he was just making stuff up and just doing what he could to get but he was brilliant at getting that attention, and he was just all about
Yeah.
attention. Me, I'm the center of attention. He was just wanted everything on him all the time, and he would do anything to get there. He wasn't beyond exploiting people to do it either. And there's a famous quote which is, "There's a sucker born every minute." People
Mm.
equate him to coming up with that quote, but it was in response to a court case he was involved with by the judge. And the judge basically resided over this case where P.T. Barnum had this body of a giant, he claimed. The mummy of a giant. Come see the mummy of the giant mummy. And he got sued because there was another guy who had the real body of the
Oh.
mummy of the giant. And P.T. Barnum stealing all my business by making a fake version of my real one. But it turns out his was also
Oh.
fake as well. So it was just a hoax of a hoax of a hoax. And the judge over this case was like, right, I'm throwing this out. This is just stupid. Like, there's a sucker born every
Yeah.
minute, and that's kind of where that comes from. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of guy P.T. Barnum was, and he created a freak show in his Curiosity Museum, and he then teamed up with Bailey. And P.T. Barnum and Bailey is the combined circus. Bailey had the menagerie of animals. P.T. Barnum had the freak show group, and they came together and created a circus. So P.T. Barnum's combined circus, a traveling show. And he's actually the one who introduced the first three-ring circus, the three-ring tent. He wanted it bigger, better, more spectacular than ever. So add more rings, you know what I mean? But the
Hmm.
thing is that that's the mainstream narrative. But when you actually look into it, you realize P.T. Barnum was a member of the Oddfellows, and the Oddfellows membership is
Mm.
extremely influential. Kings,
Yeah.
prime ministers, leaders of countries, presidents, leaders of armies, leaders of senates, and really powerful people are members of the Oddfellows. Even Albert Pike was a member of the Oddfellows, as well as a 33-degree Freemason. But not only does it have these powerful rulers of the earth as members, and I mean that quite literally, rulers of the entire earth are members of this group.
Right.
Actors are also involved, like Charlie Chaplin. of all people. You know what I mean? And the list goes on. Like Burl Ives, the musician who did Big Rock Candy Mountain, is a member. It's really strange. So why are these actors mixing with these extremely rich, powerful rulers? Elite class. It's
Mhm.
very odd society. But their logo is three interlocking rings. And lo and behold, P.T. Barnum creates the
Mm.
three-ringed circus. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, it turns out all circuses during that time became a Freemason affair from then on. It was brothers, the bros was always added on to something. So it was the Robinson Bros or the Ringling Bros is quite a famous one of the Sarasota clowns today in Florida, But bros doesn't just mean that they are related brothers. It
Right.
means they are members of the fraternity. You are a brother if you are a Freemason. And that's what they were hinting at with their names there. And 10 Freemason run circuses joined together and they created a show called King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, the biggest, most spectacular show you'll ever see. And it was just epic. Like, it had like 1,000 members involved in the performances, and it was all the glories of King Solomon's court put there for the eyes to see, And Freemasons are obsessed with King Solomon. They love King Solomon.
Yes.
They love just
Yes.
trying to build his temple over and over again. You know what I mean? He is the lord. He
Mhm.
is the
Oh, yeah.
lord of the ring. To build the temple, he used the demons with his magic ring. He is the
Right.
first wisdom master of the esoteric wisdoms of knowledge, and to use them to become a powerful wizard, basically. And he's like the idol, and that's why they all combine together and put a show on about him. Anyway, everything about circus is an analogy for Freemasonic rituals. So it's quite basic when you actually look at it. The ringleader of a circus with his top hat, they say exoterically for the profane masses, well, that represents the riding crop that the very first ringmasters used to wear in the 1600s because they were all doing horse tricks around a circle. No, nothing to do with that. Nothing at all. These circuses, the ringmaster is an analogue for the Grand Worshipful Master in a Freemason lodge, who is the only member allowed to wear a top hat. Only the leader of the lodge is allowed to wear a hat because it represents the crown of Solomon. Only the king can wear the crown. That's the symbol. A ringmaster, the lord of the ring, is King Solomon
Mm.
of a circus. He is King Solomon. And he orchestrates the performance of the clowns, yes? Well, King Solomon orchestrates the ritual of the demons. So, clowns represent the
Ah,
demons, the ringmaster represents King Solomon. That's all the circus performance ever really was. And obviously, there's a
right.
lot to be said for the sigil magic involved with doing these rituals in the middle of a ring and a circle in its own right as well, under a multicolored fractal pattern tent, which could be a mirror for the spirit realm, the DMT realm we were talking about earlier as well. It's all
Right.
it's all just analogy. It's all just symbolism to represent Freemasonic rituals on a grand public scale, right in front of the public's eyes for them to see without them ever truly knowing what's going on. Hidden in plain sight stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the clown was. The clown was quite clearly a demonic entity introduced into the world of theatre by a Freemason, which was then adopted by later Freemasons in circuses to represent the demons controlled by King Solomon in the rituals of a
Mhm.
circus performance. So there you go. That's quite literally what it all symbolically represents in an occult, hidden manner.
Right.
It's quite dark.
That's I mean, it makes complete sense where the kings, like who he would counsel with were the
Mhm.
clowns, and then we have that still today, right? We have
Mm,
the elite with the people that are the theatrical or the singers or the whatever, like Hollywood people. And it
yep.
doesn't make sense on a surface level, right? You're like, why did P. Diddy have these people at his house? Like they don't seem like that. That doesn't seem like a match, right?
Mm.
But
Well,
here we are.
yeah, well,
So,
the music industry is rife with people who still dress this way for the same
oh,
purposes of channeling demons, and I make quite a lot about that on my channel to show that all the arts, in fact, not just music, but all the art industries, they understand the secret. You dress like the thing to channel the thing, and that's the ancient practice we'll start discussing later on in the show as well. That these people still understand and still use today, and what the
yes.
Freemasons also understood when it came to using these performances. You dress like the clown to channel the spirits. And that's exactly the same
Mhm.
thing ancestor spirit culture worships do. They dress a specific way, which we would call clownish, in order to channel their ancestors so they can be possessed by
Mm.
them. And this is what the Freemasons are doing openly in the public. Now, you have to remember, shrining is a level above Freemasonry. And you have to be a 33rd degree Freemason before you can become a Shriner. But when you become a Shriner, every shrine sect has a clown part involved, where you have to dress like a clown and go entertain children at parties to fundraise, they say, or entertain children in the hospitals that they own. And
Mhm.
you have to wonder what the true purpose of this is, but including this theory
Yeah.
now, when you often send these ancient mystery wisdom schools who idolize Solomon, who communicates with demons, basically, that's also what they're trying to do. They're trying to communicate with their gods by dressing like them. They understand the
Yeah.
practice and the witchcraft involved, and they're utilizing it publicly. And then a level above shrining, and you can only be invited, you must be a high level shriner, is the Royal Order of the Jesters. And that's the highest pinnacle you can get to in the order of it all. And you have to wonder, why is being a jester considered the highest honor in this Freemasonic sect? Is because it represents symbolically the demons, the gods that they venerate and communicate with and take orders from, basically. And the jesters are the worst. They are the darkest, most evil, child raping, sex trafficking cults you could imagine, with an organization network all over the earth, abusing and destroying the lives of families everywhere, including their own members, who are heavily
Mhm.
blackmailed into conforming to disgusting acts. And they are the worst people. And you can even, a lot of it's publicly available in FBI released files of court cases involving all of this, although they've tried their best to expunge everything off the internet they legally can get away with. Okay, but you
Right.
can't get rid of the available legal documents that the government has. Unfortunately, they're still out there for the public to see if you go digging and go looking for them.
Well, and it makes you wonder, like, okay, John Wayne Gacy, I mean, it's
Absolutely.
gotta come up. Yeah, or
Yeah,
even
yeah.
Ed Gein with putting masks on or different weird things, like, we've got all these people, that aren't quite right, or even, like, if you wanna go into TV, like Michael Myers, right? He's got the mask, he's scary, he's black and white, like, all these things,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
you see that, and who does he go after? Most of the time, kids,
Hmm.
right? These are kids. But then if you watch Monsters, Inc., you really start to go, okay, harnessing energy, definitely. And I mean, there's a lot of DMT release in death. And if these kids are dying, I mean, it's a free ride, right?
Hmm.
Without trying to talk somebody into go getting something or having to buy something or whatever they do to get people to go do things.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. Well,
and I'll, yeah.
when it comes to so you mentioned Monsters Inc. there, for example. Now, what they're telling
Mhm,
you there in the media, a subtle hint that interdimensional beings in another place we cannot perceive or see feed off our energies predominantly through fear. Now, you can make,
mhm.
um, adrenochrome references there if you want to, like
Right.
which a lot of people do. But I would say it's more to do with energy harvesting and looshing, and how,
Hmm.
if you notice at the end of the film and in the series afterwards called Monsters at Work, they make their energy from laughter instead, making
Hmm.
kids laugh. Because I think there's a very fine line between laughter and crying. You use the same
Yes.
muscles and the same parts of the brain to do these actions of crying, both crying and laughter. You can cry with happiness, and you can laugh with pain.
Hmm.
Okay, there's the
Yes.
same processes involved. And I always use the analogy because I got my own son, but a toddler, when they're like going through the motions and having a tantrum or something, you can see them
Mhm.
switch from manic laughter to extreme crying in like
Right.
a nanosecond of each other, and
Right.
they're just
So
falling back
true.
and forth between the two like some kind of schizophrenic little ball of energy. And it's kind of,
Yeah.
because that's how we work. And I do believe, what does a clown elicit in people if not extreme fear or laughter? It's one of the two.
Mhm.
And to the people who are wearing the costume, they are channeling entities who want that energy.
Mhm.
They don't care what reaction they get, whether they make you feel fear from the looks of them dressed like a clown, or you think they're funny and laugh. It's all energy to them. And a
Mhm.
clown is kind of a
Yep.
funny way of getting both of those things. And what do Shriners do? They dress like a clown, channel the entity into their own body, go to dying children in hospitals to cheer them up, either terrify
Mhm.
them or make them laugh, and then feed the demon that they're
Right.
channeling. So it's a transactional process, and that, I think that's why they actually do that. And it's just hidden under the
Yeah.
veneer of, it's just a bit of fun for the kids. We're trying to help dying kids. We're a
Mhm.
charitable organization. But when you understand just how the spirit world works and what it means to dress like something, it's far more nefarious than it seems on the surface. Way more nefarious than
Right.
that. Even Stephen King's Pennywise character,
Oh,
is
for
a is
sure.
a fear energy drinking, interdimensional vampiric entity who manifests as a clown to elicit fear in people. That's the point, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it's the same story. It's the same, not it's the Monsters Inc.
Right.
story, and people like Stephen King who write these books, they have nothing new under their belts.
No,
They just
no.
know the truth and make a book about it and claim they came up with it for the clout. You know, they have no
Right.
they have no original ideas of their own,
No.
and it is a prime example. And the irony of all this is, you know, today they really push the clown on people as something cool and a way to be and actually how to
Mm-hmm.
dress. And even in 2023, that's just last year, clown core fashion was the top trending fashion on the runways. There was
Oh,
runway models
yeah.
walking down at the highest shows in Paris, you know what I mean? Dressed like Harley Quinn and
With
clowns, you know?
giant well, or giant clothes, like, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's either the black and white Harlequin thing, or it's the giant pants, the giant oversized, like the grunge. And I see it now, and I'm like,
Hmm.
because I have teenagers,
Yeah.
and they all. I mean, I bought 46 waist pants for my size 4 girl, because
Hmm.
that's what the cool thing to do is, and it does remind you of a clown, because
Yeah.
then you just see these big sneakers at the bottom that stick out, big fat sneakers.
Mm.
And I mean, it's very reminiscent, let alone,
I wish they were being
makeup.
subtle, but they're quite literally
Yeah.
saying on the runways, dressing like a clown is the hot trend for 2023.
So
So
weird.
the runway models have red noses, are wearing
Mm,
big puffy wigs, and literally look like clowns walking down catwalks in Paris, you know, and this is the hot trend.
so
You'll find
weird.
there's a whole movement on TikTok right now for especially the young, young millennials and Gen Z. They're all like dressing quite literally like a clown, and they call it the clown core aesthetic. And
Mm,
they're going as a legitimate fashion choice to walk around in the streets on a day-to-day basis with. This is the new thing and the new trend, you know, and it's supported by the media
yeah.
naturally because they want as many people as possible dressing this way
Right.
because it opens up more channels for the entities on the other
Mhm.
side, which are the Nephilim. So that's the game at play here. It's just about creating more portals and gateways to the spirit realm, and dressing like
Right.
something is one of the main staple ways of doing that, next to taking drugs, doing particular rituals and dance and music. The costume is just a
Yes.
part of the process, and it is pushed so heavily on us. Every year there's a new reboot of the Joker or It or something, or a new
Yeah.
clown murderer film, or something clown related. It has to be released every year so the clown people can be obsessed with it and dress like it. And that
Right before Halloween
just
too,
before
like making
Halloween.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Which
"Oh,
is
dress like this."
yeah,
Like, do you know that the Harlequin thing went crazy with, Harley Quinn?
yeah.
It was either her or a Harlequin, like, either way, it
Exactly,
was a
yeah.
big thing.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
Harley Quinn, you know, I think some people don't understand what I'm saying. When I say Harley Quinn, they think I'm talking about this character from some DC
No.
comic universe.
Harlequin.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm like, that character is based off of and named after this ancient thing I'm talking about,
Yes.
you know. And I don't, people don't know that though. I think
Yeah.
a lot of them are surprised to learn when I'm talking about Harlequin. Like, Harlequin's not demonic; she's just like an ex-psychiatrist who. And it's like,
She's just
it's like
crazy. Yeah.
you don't understand what I'm actually talking about here, and you don't know the
No.
origins of where these ideas come from. And I'm trying to say it's purely demonic in the truest sense, you know.
Well, and the mate with her and Joker, like, depending on which film you go with, right? Like, sometimes he looks like, the other one, the French one,
Pero,
the
yeah,
sad one.
yeah.
Yeah. And so it just makes complete sense, because then it's like the full
Mhm.
thing together, plus it's male and female, just like the
Yeah.
Nephilim, like, can be,
So yeah, so
I mean,
maybe it's probably a good idea because I do is I get
yeah.
ahead of myself. Maybe we should explain now the history of the Nephilim and why they look like clowns and
Yes.
how this happened exactly. So if you look at the Book of Enoch, you'll understand that the Watchers came down to Earth. Some of them with good intentions. In some cases, like the Book of Giants, I think it explains they asked to come down so they could help teach mankind to be righteous. Many of them came down because they wanted to watch over humanity and teach them the good things and how to be righteous. But there was also a leader of them called Semyaza and Azazel, who seemed to have
Mhm.
something else in mind. And from my research, it seems like there was this moment where Semyaza went down to prepare the way for the rest before they came down. And that's an odd way of describing it, okay? Because if you understand, it's like, why did he need to go down first? What was he going to do? Exactly. Why couldn't they all just
Mhm.
why couldn't they all just descend to Mount Hermon together, you know, at the same time? And
Right.
I believe because there was an angelic rebellion happening around the same time, Lucifer and his angels
Mhm.
were at war with God. I believe Samyaza was one of those rebellious angels who was actively involved in active rebellion and was using this as an excuse to corrupt the Watchers who wanted to go down there and start the rebellious process of corrupting God's creation. Because I believe Lucifer or Satan or whatever name you want to give this angel that was full of pride and refused to bow down to
Mhm.
humanity was very jealous that Adam had been given so much, the whole earth. In fact,
Mhm.
he gets to name the animals. So why didn't God choose us, or let alone why didn't He choose maybe perhaps the more dominant serpent race, which was clearly better than this pathetic mammal
Mhm.
race, which he so idolizes so much. So the old Gary Wayne talks a lot about that type of thought
Yes,
process. It's
yes.
rebellion, and he was a huge influence for a lot of my work in the early years, and I've referenced it in my book quite a lot to explain the history because I think he's mapped out the history wonderfully. But
Mhm.
this rebellion's
Yeah.
happening. Samyaza clearly has a plan, or he's in cahoots with Lucifer in some way. But you have to remember there was also a earthly rebellion going on with the humans. Cain, for example, murdered his brother and was cast out. And it's
Mhm.
described as he went to the land of Nod and built a city after taking a wife and having children, and he called the city Enoch after his first son. So who did he take a wife from? And how the hell did he build? How the hell did he build a city all on his own? Okay, so this
Mhm.
implies heavily there were people everywhere, not just Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is highly controversial stuff I'm talking about here.
Nope. Yeah.
But if you actually look into it, there's good, solid foundation for this claim. It's not just wild speculation. It does seem like there may have been other humans around who were told to multiply and subdue the earth. And it seems like Adam was selected and put in a separate place called the garden while all that was happening. But then Adam messed up big
Mhm.
time with Eve and was kicked out of the garden into the world with the rest of the people. And that's when Cain and Abel killed each other. Well, killed Abel. Cain leaves, and then
Mhm.
builds a city after establishing it. And I believe, as people who walked with God, and Adam knew God quite intimately, I believe he knew a thing or two. He probably taught his children a thing
Mhm.
or two as well, advanced knowledge,
Right.
And I think Cain was probably likely seen as a god among these other tribal people who did not walk in the Eden with God. He knew things. And it said that Cain introduced weights and measures. Now, that seems basic to us. A tape measure, a ruler, so what? So what about balance and understanding weights and all these type of things? But what he actually introduced was division of land and property. He introduced concepts of ownership. He introduced a very selfish concept to an otherwise agrarian, open with nature, loving, connected society that didn't have borders or
Mhm.
understanding property or that type of thing. He introduced dividing
Right.
dividing lines among humanity, and he began that corruption attempt to dominate and own everything. And he built cities, which are quite a domineering thing to build, to be honest. It's you subjugate the land to build a city, you destroy resources and put them into new shapes and forms which otherwise go against creation and that original design God had in mind. But that's what his son did, Enoch, and that's what Cain was doing. And he was spreading
Mhm.
spreading and propagating. But Cain was marked, remember? Because when he
Yeah.
killed Abel, he says, "Don't send me out into the world. I'll die. They
Right.
will kill me. Who will
And
kill
who
him?"
are they? Yeah.
So God says, "No, I'm going to seal you with a mark so people know you're mine. And if they do kill you, the punishment on them will be sevenfold worse than your own curse." And it's that type of thing. And it says the mark will last for 7 generations or 8 generations, roughly. And no one knows what this mark is. There's been wild speculation, and many a racist group has tried to claim one skin color or the other is the mark of the beast.
Right.
If it wasn't a literal seal on the head or something quite very physical, like a visible mark, like a scar, like Harry Potter, for example,
Mhm.
with his lightning bolt on his head or something. I don't know, but if you read the book of Lamech of Cain, which was the seventh generation from Cain's lineage, so not the eighth generation down from um Seth's lineage. There's two lineages here, isn't there? There's the good lineage of Seth, the bad lineage of Cain. Now Lamech on
Mhm.
Cain's side, he wrote a book apparently during his time, and it's his quest to find out the truth of who did Cain mate with to create all of us. Even he doesn't know
Yeah.
the answer. Even he's confused. Like, how did this happen? If Adam and Eve were the only two people, we've been lied to. Something's wrong here, you know. And I do believe
Mhm.
knowledge was held back heavily during that time to control people. Cults were created during this time. Humanity was in their own form of rebellion against God, and it was mainly headed by Cain and his progeny who were ruling over the people and corrupting people, you know. While Seth was
Mhm.
just doing the righteous thing over there, living quite peacefully with the land. Um, Cain was doing his own thing, quite warlike nation, you know. And in the book of Lamech of Cain, he describes the mark and the curse as leprous white skin. So not white people's skin,
Mhm.
not like me or you who just burn a little bit in the sun
Right.
and lack a bit of melanin. I'm talking like a vampire. Vampiric,
Right.
deathly, leprosy type, dusty white, dead skin. Like these people look dead.
Mm.
They look like vampires. And that's the mark of Cain. So bear that in mind. White skin, like a clown, one might say. Like
Mhm.
clown cake makeup looking white. Like Queen Elizabeth with her Venetian ceruse,
Yeah.
lead-based paint, white, you know. So it's possible that could have been the mark if you take that book into account. And with that in
Mhm.
mind, let's go back to the angelic rebellion. Other Watchers, I believe, the majority of them were likely seraphim angels who were the closest to God, the most trusted confidants of God, the only angels who can really get close enough to God to communicate with Him, who sang around His throne singing, Holy, Holy, Holy. These are the seraphim. Seraphim translates
Mhm.
to fiery flying serpent. These were dragons by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination, and they likely could shapeshift and take human form. They didn't have bodies like us, they were spiritual entities, but they could interact with the physical realm quite literally. We've seen plenty of examples in the Bible where angels came down to earth in human form to try and help people. Sodom and Gomorrah is a good example, you know, the angels came to warn.
Yeah.
They have abilities that we don't have, but I think the true form are dragons. And if you imagine a fiery flying serpent, as it says in the book of Enoch, who mated and took wives of the daughters of Cain, these white-skinned, clown-looking, vampiric things, and mash those two things together, well, you get something that looks like a wide-grinned, red-lipped, odd, pointed, sharp-featured nose, big bug, wild reptile, slit eyes, wild, crazy, fiery red hair, dragon human hybrid.
Mhm.
That's what the Nephilim would have looked like, and there are plenty of examples all throughout human history and artwork and in myths and mythologies ingrained in stone, quite literally, from Europe to India to Australia to China, all the way to Siberia, and all the way into the North and South Americas. These entities have always existed, and there's multiple cultural specific artistically styled representations of the same entities. They have big wide
Mhm.
grins with sharp teeth, huge wild bulging eyes, wild, crazy red hair of some kind, and multicolored patterned skin. These are
Mm.
the Nephilim. These are the snake, dragon, human hybrids that were created. And the irony is, a lot of the time when we see depictions of Nephilim in the early days, when people just started like discussing the concept of the Nephilim on YouTube, the pictures people would
Mhm.
use were very boring. They were just big people with huge
Yeah.
pectoral muscles and brown hair wearing a loincloth, you
Yeah.
know. But that's not at all what they would have looked like. They would have looked insane. And
Mhm.
in the book of Enoch, which includes the book of Noah, it talks about when Noah was born, and his father is terrified of Noah
Mhm.
because he even
Yes.
says, "It looks like I have given birth to a son of the angels." Like it looks like my
I
son.
think he might have been a, what do you call it when they're completely white? Albino. I think he
Something
might
like
have been
that. But
albino.
but he
Yeah.
said his eyes glowed and
Right.
his hair was golden and his skin was white and ruddy with red patches. And now
Oh,
I don't think Noah was a Nephilim, but
no.
but that description of Noah can give us an insight to what the Nephilim did look like, only
Right.
because his father says he looks like the child of the sons of God. He looks like one of the Nephilim.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't mean he was the Nephilim. He
No.
was just a very divine, God-selected man who was going to procreate the rest of the earth after a flood. So I think he was special,
Yeah.
you know. But I don't think he was a Nephilim
Right.
necessarily. But his father thought he looked like one. So that description we have
Right.
is brilliant insight into what the Nephilim did look like. And pale white skin with glowing wide eyes and wild multicolored hair is kind of what
One of
this
the
it's a
yeah.
good way we can get an inflection, and then the descriptions of the dragons all throughout cultures and the seraphim angels, you have to use your imagination a little bit, but it's not hard to see what those two things blended together would look like. And it looks something akin to a clown. So a clown, which was, a caricature in the West, is what a clown is. It's a caricature of Nephilim
Mm-hmm.
features. So they have taken these examples from all around the earth of the Rakshasas, the dragon people, the Wanjinas of Australia, um, the Heyokas of North America, the wild men of Europe, and the cookery traditions of Bulgaria, wherever they can find them, all the ancestor spirit worship traditions of Africa as well. They've
Mm-hmm.
seen all these things and they've kind of mashed them all together and created
Right.
their own version. And we call it a clown, and we don't know it's
Mm.
modeled after the Nephilim, but that's what it was. So everything about a clown is again an analogous metaphor to represent demons, which are the disembodied forms of Nephilim when they were physical. And again, like the analogy of the circus and Solomon and orchestrating the demons, that's what the clown is, another analogy or a metaphor. So wild red hair, common descriptor of all Nephilim. You can find
Mm-hmm.
North American tribes who dealt with the city car, cannibalistic, pale-skinned, red-haired giants who were eating their tribes members and stealing their women. Okay, well, what did they do? They went to war with them and they trapped them in a cave and burnt the cave entrance and smoked them to death. That's quite a
Mm-hmm.
modern oral tradition story of modern encounters with these remaining giants. Pale white skin, red hair is the most common description of anyone who's encountered these monsters, and it's the most common artistic depiction on classic artwork, pottery, stone engravings, wherever you can find artwork and masks representing these beings. They look like that. So that's the base of a clown: white skin, red hair. And that's why it was
Mm-hmm.
incorporated into the modern clown costume. And then you have the big red lip makeup, serpentine mouth, wide mouth. Snakes can dislocate their jaws to eat their prey. Probably a trait inherited by their seraphim flying serpent parents. That's why clowns are always depicted with a very wide, unnatural smile. It said they had two sets of teeth. Now, people think that means like one row behind the other, but it means two sets next to each other, more likely. A very
Mm.
wide set of teeth, which is what humans just do not have. Elongated features like big eyes, big bug, serpentine, bulging like eyes. Clowns often paint brow ridges that look really tall just above the eyes to accentuate that feature. Sometimes they shade them
Mm.
in with a blue paint, so when the artist closes his eyes, it looks like he has big blue glowing eyes. Again, a reference to the glowing ones, the glowing eyes that Noah had when he was born, the glowing eyes, the divine semi-angelic nature which emanated from them, from the Nephilim. You have the bald cap, which often makes the forehead look much bigger than it actually is as well. That's a Nephilim trait. We have the skulls of Paracas and Inca skulls, which show that these elongated creatures existed with big elongated skulls.
Right.
And that's a distinctly Nephilim feature, probably serpentine feature, just stretched out features like a snake. So there's
Mm-hmm.
the basic of a clown makeup on the face. Clowns often have black slits painted down their eyes or crosses. A slit is a predator thing. A slit pupil is only something predators have. So most cats have it. Some
Right.
canids, like foxes, have them. Only one species of bird has slit pupils, and most reptiles have slit pupils because
Mm.
it's a predator thing. It gives them a better view of the plane of their prey to gauge distances when hunting. So why does the clown have
Mhm.
slit pupils? Because it's representing a major predator who used to eat people and kill us and subjugate us and became the kings and rulers over us. Quite literally ate us alive. We were its prey. That's why we put the slit down there. It's a metaphor.
Mhm.
It's a symbol. Then you have the red nose. Now, the red nose is a common painted thing for most of these tribes who dress like their ancestors. They're dressing like the spirits, they're dressing like the Nephilim. Often white the makeup up with chalk paint and then put a red dot on the nose. It's very common. Not always the case, but you see it a lot when you look at different cultures from like all the way from Africa to Papua New Guinea, all the way to the Americas. A redded up nose is very common. And there's probably a reason for that. And I do think the Nephilim likely did have red noses, only because of by virtue of their pale white skin.
Mm.
So there's this thing called the Curse of the Celts that predominantly pale people get. That's why it's called the Curse of the Celts. And it's a genetic condition. You can't catch this or anything. You don't get it by doing too much of something. Like people think drinking too much can cause this. Has nothing to do with it. You either have it or you don't. It's a genetic corruption. I actually have it, but I don't have the extreme end stage version of this, which is what this is described as. It's called a rhinophyma. And it causes the nose to just get bigger and more bulbousy and more red and full of pus and really painful and large. And it's an extreme form of rosacea, funnily enough. Now,
Mm.
my version of this, it doesn't manifest as rosacea. It manifests as an
Mm.
iron problem. I can't process iron, so I get too much iron in
Mm.
my blood, and it causes me to have to regularly get my blood drained to keep the iron deposits down. Because if I have too much iron, it turns into it's toxic. It can kill my liver and my heart or my lungs and basically kill me. So you have to regularly keep track of it and keep the iron levels down. And that's just one version of the Curse of the Celts. But this other version causes a big red bulbous nose to happen. And if
Mm.
it's a predominantly white person problem, now don't get me wrong, other races can get it, but it's predominantly
Right.
99.9% a white people problem. And the Nephilim had the palest skin. Maybe they had
Right.
extreme rosacea. Maybe they had polka dot red patches all over their white skin. Maybe they developed big red bulbous noses. It's highly possible. The older they got, the more this began to manifest on them. Just speculating, but
Right.
it's a regular feature always represented when people dress like the ancestor spirits. So it must be a feature they actually had in some way if they're trying to mimic or mirror that image. So that's the clown face. All Nephilim
Mhm.
features through and through, including multicolored patterned fractals and squares and diamonds. Serpent skin. Snakes are very colourful patterned creatures. Reptiles are very psychedelic in their look. They're not boring, plain, bland creatures. Extremely colourful. And that's why the clothing of a clown is so patchwork, colourful, psychedelic, patterned, striped, lined. It's reptilian features. That's what they're trying to represent with this costume. It's baggy because it represents that they're really big. They're giants,
Mhm.
big gloves, big shoes, giant features, walking on stilts because they're giants. It's just metaphor for their giant nature. It's an exaggeration. Wearing a tiny hat or holding a tiny umbrella because they're enormous. They're huge.
Right.
Well, it's things like that. It's just a tongue-in-cheek back and forth metaphor. Now, the ruffle around the
Wow.
neck. It's an Elizabethan fashion choice, yes, which early clowns did used to have, especially when starch was invented. And the thicker and the stiffer the ruffle, the more influence you had, and the
Mhm.
bigger it was, the more ridiculous it looked, the more power you had, because you could afford to starch your clothes up. You know what I mean? But it's also actually a distinctly reptilian feature in a frill.
Mhm.
And there's a frilled lizard of Australia that has this, and it opens up like a big wide
Yeah.
circle around the neck. And only reptiles can develop this thing called a frill. Some fishes do too, but obviously we're talking about land dwelling creatures here with reptilian features.
Mhm.
Lizards have frills, and so does the clown in the neck ruffle. So a quite
Mm.
literal representation of another reptilian feature there. And that's a clown basically broken down and why it is a model of Nephilim features. And that's why the Nephilim did indeed have what we would describe as clownish features today. Now, there's a bit of misnomer with the name of my theory. I do call it the Nephilim look like clowns as a bit of a catch-all hook. But
Right.
as my wife repeatedly tells me, I'm lying to the people. It's actually clowns look like Nephilim. Yes, okay,
Right.
that's technically correct, but what I'm saying sounds cooler. The Nephilim look like clowns. Okay, so there you go.
Well, it's definitely gonna get your attention, right? It's definitely gonna make it so
Yeah.
you go, "Wait, what is he saying?" And I mean, it does make you wonder, and I often delve into, the orphan trains and, like, I was fine about it when I first heard about it. I thought, "Oh, well, a bunch of people died. Who cares?" I mean, not who cares, but, like, it's fine until you start really researching, right? It's like a Freemasonic situation, and then the sheer number, I was like, "Excuse me? 250,000 children? You can only have so many kids a year. This doesn't sound right." And
No.
then you start looking further back, right? And, like, if you go clear back to, Diana of Ephesus, we're back, with worship here, and she's got all these eggs all over her
Hmm.
breasts, whatever. And then there's all these rumors that India had far past figured out cloning, and then your mind just runs with it because then you're like, why is there certain areas that are just so distinctly, like you say, the curse of the Celts? Like, why is there certain people that are so white? Why is there certain areas that are so white? This is not common in the world. Like, if you look at the world as a whole, it's really not.
Hmm.
White is not the norm for the world. It's very much based more in browns. And so you go, hmm, okay, well, that's odd. And then the one thing I always thought of is, not just the people that were locked up, which, okay, that's some people, but like there wasn't that many people here to lock up. We were settling
Hmm.
this area. Like this was new. And so then you think, well, What's the one thing that they could introduce into a society that would be unassuming and accepted by most people? Kids. Kids would be accepted. And when you look at old movies, there's always a farm boy. Where'd the farm boy come from? If you watch The Princess Bride, I often wondered, where's the farm parents? Where did these people go? Like, where, if he works there, where's his mom and dad? Like, well, why is this a normal thing all the time? You see it in old shows all the time. And then you start to find out, like, okay, we've got this kid problem. We're going to ship them all over. We've got too many. They're working in factories. That seems really weird. Like, okay, this kid thing is a problem, but in the midst of the problem, like we've got so many kids, we just don't know what to do with them. We're going to ship kids all over the place to get rid of them. But in the meantime, when the World's Fair is happening, we're going to save every baby that's ever born that's premature, that would naturally die on its own. Natural selection has said, I'm sorry, you came too early, you're going to pass. But let's save more kids to add to our problem to have too many babies. Why are we, and they look weird. Like if you go back and then you think, well, why is the United States one of the places where people absolutely, and I've traveled all over, have a different look? They do. There are many, many, many people when they're traveling, people will say, "You're an American." And I'm like, "Why do you know that? That's really weird." And it isn't any deciphering specific thing. They know. And I'm like, "Why do they know?" But also the health problems. Like you just start, if you go down the rabbit hole, and I know it sounds crazy, like I know that, but you also have to look at the time. Like, why were there Catholic places that were dug up later and there's just dead babies everywhere? Like, you can only have so many babies a year. A woman can only breed a baby per year. Like, I don't think the population sustains some of the stuff. And then you look at Hollywood, like American Horror Story, Murder House, and these babies in jars and experiments and weird stuff. And I don't know about you, but it's fascinating. Am I sure that they did something? No, but it's interesting. It's a rabbit hole for sure, right?
Well, that is perhaps we could do a whole podcast on that topic another day, to be honest,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it is definitely a fascinating one. And if you want to just take what you can from that, then genetic engineering is something that has been on the cards since the Nephilim were created, and it's explained after the initial incursion of the Nephilim. A lot of them were killed off before the flood in bloody battles where they kind of destroyed each other. And that was the punishment for the Watchers who created them. They had to watch their beloved ones kill each other. So most of the big OG Nephilim clown-looking giants died way before the
Mhm.
flood, but their offspring were still around because their offspring also raped human women, and their offspring raped human women. There were slightly smaller iterations appearing with each new generation of Nephilim from this time
Right.
period, and they were slightly less snake-like but slightly more human-like, and it's like they get blended together. And then I think that's where things like Bigfoot and the wild men, hairy people came from. These iterations, these lower versions. But the original OG Nephilim, the first original, perfectly half angel, perfectly
Right.
half human, they look like clowns. They look like they're the
Before people messing with it. That's
yeah,
my conspiracy is they were trying to make it so that they fit, right? Like
yeah.
fit into society. So you see all these midgets all the time back in the olden days and or little people, however, you want to say, but they had them there all the time. Dwarfs were very common in the court, but so were clowns. Why? Maybe they were trying to breed that down a little bit.
Well, you could argue about the serpent line as well, the serpent seed. Is that the
Yeah.
true serpent seed? It's nothing to do with Cain being the
Makes you
offspring of the
wonder.
devil.
Yeah.
It's actually this incursion that happened where a half dragon
Where
human mix was put into the mix, and then they tried to blend it with. And don't forget, a lot of humans around this time, just before the flood, were willingly mixing with this other
Mhm.
race
Yep.
because the flood didn't happen for no reason. The humans were
Yeah.
corrupt,
Yeah.
and it describes in the book of Jasher that the humans decided to take it upon themselves to genetically corrupt themselves. So it's nothing to do with angels mixing themselves with humans anymore. Humans were mixing their own kinds together. It's described as the mixing of kinds in the book of Jasher. And and I think angels probably taught them the methods to do this, but genetic engineering
Mhm.
began and it was a human affair. And humans started messing with animals, slapping them together, creating weird hybrids. And then humans started mixing themselves with animals, creating human-animal hybrids like serpent men, dog men, fish men, mermen, flying men, moth men, whatever you want to
Mhm.
call it. All the cryptids. This is where they all come from.
Right.
This
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
mixing of genetic kinds just before the flood. Then a flood comes,
Mhm.
pretty much wipes most of them out, except for those who could likely survive something like a flood because they became a fish person. It's kind of,
Mm.
and that's why we get mermaids.
Yeah.
That's why we get the corruption after the flood, because a lot of these people who corrupted themselves likely made it after the flood. So these aren't Nephilim that I'm talking about here. These are a different type of creature. So
Right.
Nephilim are not the only demon in town. They're just a specific one
Mhm.
that looks a specific way. And I think there's good precedence to believe that when these humans corrupted their spirit, their flesh, they also corrupted the soul. And they also became faux Nephilim in the sense that they could no longer leave the earth either. Like, to mess with the body is
Mhm.
not just separate from the soul in a way. You mess with the body, you corrupt the spirit. And that's the issue with
Yeah.
the Nephilim. They're stuck here as wandering spirits, cannot leave the earth because they never should have existed to begin with. They are with one with the earth. They are a strictly unheavenly inspired being with no heavenly essence in them. Unlike humans, God breathed our nefesh into us, our
Mhm.
soul. The Nephilim never had that, so they don't have any connection to anything other than the earth, so they remain on the earth
There.
in death. But I believe these humans who chose to manipulate themselves likely took the same fate and are also stuck as spirits in the other realm right now on earth too. And that's why you have lesser demons and higher demons. The higher demons are the OG Nephilim. The lesser demons are the humans who
Mhm.
mutated themselves. They became
Right.
X-Men, mutants. That's what they became. And I think
Mhm.
it could be said that they are also in the spirit realm. And no, they don't look like clowns. They look like, well, they look like
Right.
weird hybrid spider people or some, I don't know, whatever they decided to mix
Who
themselves with
knows
to
what?
give themselves
Yeah.
superpowers. There was a weird blend going on during that time. And again, if you want to get into the weird history of today, it does say, God said to the serpent, I'm going to put enmity between your seed and her seed.
Mhm.
And people always have assumed, and, reasonably so, well, that must mean the serpent must have had sex with Eve. And that means Cain is actually a serpent
Mm.
seed or something. And that's the enmity forever that's going to happen. But I'm thinking that was God saying, I know your plan. I know you're going to go out there
Mhm.
and corrupt my creation. You're going to create your own type of thing because
Right.
I created man in my image. You're going to create something in your image. I think that's what he was
Mhm.
saying, and he's warning him ahead of time. Go ahead.
Right.
You will lose. You will bite its heel, but it'll crush your skull. Like, that's basically what the warning was. So it's kind of, go and make your Nephilim. They are not going to
Right.
survive. It's kind of like God knew the plan from the start. It's kind of,
Right.
I get what
Yeah.
you're going to do here. So people, like I said, have assumed Cain was where the serpent seed happened, but it was actually just the daughters of Cain mixing with angels that
Mhm.
created the serpent seed. So I think it happened just a little bit further on in history, not
Yeah.
right in the initial incursion in the Garden of Eden necessarily. But a lot of people will argue to the end of the earth that I'm
Right.
I'm crazy for even thinking that. Like, obviously Cain's the serpent seed, but if you just look into it, there's plenty of options here to how the serpent seed happened. And it doesn't necessarily have
Mhm.
to be through Cain. I think the Nephilim best get explain that. But I don't want to play that game today of pointing to people with certain blood
Right.
types, for example. Are you RH
Yeah.
negative? You must have Nephilim
Yeah.
blood or something. We don't really know today. This is how watered down it
Mhm.
would be. You could not tell the difference. It's the wheat and the tares analogy. Leave it to the
Yeah.
final harvest.
Yes.
Leave it to the reaper to decide who is and isn't a tare. Not for you to make that choice, because you can't tell the difference until the final harvest. You cannot
Well, and
know.
even then, it says that, Jesus came here to preach to every creature, not
Yeah.
just every person.
Hmm.
So, I mean, even if it is the wheat and the tares, like the people that have accepted him as their savior, like I believe, regardless of whatever taintedness, whatever,
Hmm.
would be saved,
Yeah.
regardless of how they were here. So,
It's like why we need new bodies. Why that's the promise
right.
in the end of it. The soul will be given born again new light bodies, and there'll be a whole new heaven and new earth for this reason. Because the current earth is
Mhm.
corrupted with these parasites on the other side, these demons, and they need to be dealt with and
Right.
destroyed with the earth. A new creation needs to be made, and new bodies need to be given to us because ours were wholly corrupted through this whole rebellious thing that began at the beginning of time with Adam in the Garden of Eden. Christ came to reverse this. Christ came to fix this
Yes.
problem and give us a way, a solution to be free from the curses that have been put upon us by this rebellion, and obviously to as a promise to Adam as well, that he would solve the issue. This is how we solve the issue with the second Adam, with Jesus, the perfected
Right.
human
Right.
who didn't mess up, and Jesus gave us
Well, and that's
authority.
why people say all the time, "Oh, well, the Old Testament's a different God." And I'm like, "No, he just had a different agenda."
Yeah.
He was a crazy madman trying to save his children without Jesus. So he was like, kill the people, kill the dogs, kill the animals, kill everything, because he wanted it to stop. And if they can go into anything, like it shows that they can with the pigs,
Hmm.
right? Then it goes on and on and on and on. So
Hmm.
he was like, wipe it all, just kill every. And he was a crazy person, because think of how you would be as a parent. I would too. Like if anything was trying to kill my child, like I would be a crazy person. For sure I would. Like if I was out in the wilderness, anything that came toward my kid that looked like it was going to come for him, like nope, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that explains a lot, you
Much, yeah,
know.
much of what God did in the Old Testament that people point to, look how what an evil, genocidal,
Yeah,
vindictive, cruel, prison keeper this person is. And it's kind of like, no, if you understand what was going on at that time, he was trying his best to save us, and thank God he did send that flood, because there would be no flesh left. There wouldn't be
right.
humans left. There would be nothing but this corrupted, weird hybrid race of evil continuously in their hearts, monsters everywhere, eating each other and tearing each other apart
Yeah.
constantly, and that's what was going on.
Yeah, that
It was
sounds awful.
Yeah, it was,
Well, and
and
that gets into Hollywood, like the whole weird them eating flesh. Like you hear this weird stuff and you think that's not possible. But then you like think if they are channeling, I'm not talking corruption here, I'm talking channeling. Like all of the symbology that they do, like, okay, Jay-Z does the rock diamond. Well, I know what that is. That's the manifestation triangle. Like has nothing to do with the no rock diamond. Okay. That this is like other things that are old and old and old and old, right?
mhm.
None of this stuff like is new, and they are channeling. She even says, Beyonce says she has Sasha Fierce, and she enters her and she doesn't know what she does, and blah blah blah, and that they look different. Like look at after the years, like she is whiter. I'm sorry, I don't know what the heck's going on. That woman is half more white than she used to be. That's weird. Same with Michael Jackson, same with a lot of them. Like their physical appearance completely changes. And why is it that they always go after their nose first? You notice that? Like always their noses. They go in and start messing with them. And most of the time, like you have to be smart enough by now and in this day and age to see all the old movie stars lose their noses and have them fall off and all this weird stuff. But yet what do they do? First off, like almost the first surgery after boobs for women. And I think it might be the first one for guys. Like they cut their noses off and get a new one, and it's a thing. And I'm like, why is this so hyper focused? That seems strange.
What is
Like,
strange on the nose, through my research into North American giants and tribes, another name that
mm-hmm,
was often given to them was the noseless ones, which is, I thought, was a really odd
mm,
description. Like, it's not that maybe that they had a red nose, but they had a hole where the nose should be instead,
oh,
which is quite an interesting way of viewing the round nose thing going on. But yeah,
which it
yeah.
would be red.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be a big red hole full of blood. It'd be
Yeah.
bleeding constantly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So it could be that. But in terms of like Michael Jackson's a good example, because there's loads of images of Michael Jackson next to like pharaoh images and
Mm-hmm.
statues, and he's been molded to look the same as these statues of these
So
ancient
weird.
pharaoh kings and these gods. Well, it's, god kings, as was the past with the
Mm-hmm.
serpent blood and the divine right to be the rulers, because they believed they were
Right.
the hybrid descendants of the
Well, they
Nephilim.
had the weird heads and everything.
Yeah, but you have
Yeah.
to
I
wonder,
mean,
is these famous people make a deal to channel demons for veneration,
mm-hmm.
so the demons can get their energy from the crowds, no doubt, and obviously the vessel gets the bonus of billions of riches and anything they ever want during that time of being used by the
Oh,
demon
and I
in them.
don't think they realize, right? Like when you
No,
get into it, you're
some
like,
some do, some don't. Yeah, I
whatever.
think some will know what they're doing. Some will be very
Yeah.
ignorant of what's happening to them. But like I said, it's interesting to say, like, it's a chicken or the egg situation. It's kind of,
Hmm.
are they ended up do they end up looking more like a Nephilim because the spirit within them has manipulated their body to look more like them, so they can
Hmm.
reflect or are they changing their body to look more like the spirit within? Like,
Right.
which
With
way
what
is
they
it?
see.
Yeah, are they trying to
Mhm.
strengthen the channel to the demon by changing their own bodies purposefully? Or is the demon within them making them change their body without them knowing? So the body looks more like the
Right.
demon. You don't know which way, and I think there's a bit of this, a bit
No.
of that going on, depending on the knowledge involved with this. But you can't help but notice if you look at like what I call the multicolored collective, which is a group of people, an umbrella term for a group of people that exist right now in the modern culture, who tend to multicolor the hair up, dehumanize themselves a little
Mm.
bit, tattoo themselves up, mark the skin, deform themselves with piercings, bright and wild multicolored fractal hair, clown-like makeup everywhere, mutilate their bodies in some way, shape, or form. They wave a rainbow flag around, you know, the multicolored, the
Mhm.
very clownish things are getting involved with their parades dedicated to a particular sin, which the Nephilim were quite
Mhm.
infamous for being a part of, quite prideful
Yeah.
creatures, beloved of themselves because of their enormous power over humans. And you have to wonder, is that the spirit within them manifesting physically in these movements and in these
Yeah.
people? Or is it perhaps them end up dressing this way, invite more of the spirits in? Which is I think it's a two-way channel.
Agree.
It's a two-way channel,
Especially
you
with
know.
cutting things off and mutilating
Mm,
your body, like, because it does mention so many times that they were neither male nor female that they could kind of pick, you know?
mm-hmm,
And it was dependent on, I guess, the situation as far as what it they say, but, that was with the angels, of course, not with the actual Nephilim. I think that was more set, but I just wonder, like, you see these people after so much time, and it never ends well, like, never. And then you see, like, the guy that did the Joker, and then he freaking died right after that. Like, I mean, what kind of level is this going to? You know, and you're
mm-hmm,
nothing. If you are channeling a spirit and it doesn't care. It doesn't care to what level, like, it really doesn't care if you die. Like, it
mm-hmm.
really doesn't. It'll
No.
find a new one.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that big a deal to them. We are nothing. And that's what I always have to remind my mom, because she's always like, anything I say about even the elites, like trying to make our lives miserable or whatever. She's like, but why would they do that? I'm like, because you're like an ant in their house. Like, you don't think about the ant's family when you're messing with this ant. Okay.
No.
And clearly they have one, you know, they have a whole colony. They're big, like, but you don't care. And that's how they are. And same for these spirits, for these people that make these deals. And I find it fascinating because it always has to do with what? Makeup and like crazy, the more crazy you can be. And for the men wearing dresses, and you mentioned that the first outfits were kind of a dress, you know, I mean, it's just so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the parallels. I
Yeah,
really,
like I said, one of the
yeah.
main tricks to the industry is if you want to be famous, it's not to have any particular talents in your field, whether that's singing or art or painting or whatever it is. It's just to dress like a psychedelic clown monster. And if you do that,
Mhm.
the people who run the industry will see you and go, you get to be the next famous idol because you look like that. And we want more people to look like that because it opens up more portals. And if we put you in the spotlight, you'll become an idol. If you're idolized, people will emulate the way you look. If people emulate the
Mhm.
way you look, more channels for the demons to come in because more people are dressing like
Right.
clowns and opening up more portals ignorantly. And ignorance of the law does not make you immune to the spiritual law, unfortunately. It doesn't work like that.
Mhm.
And you can dress like something and not know what it's doing, but you're still channeling whether you like it or not. And that's why we should be very careful
Mhm.
with how we choose to dress ourselves and how we apply our makeup as well. I mean, makeup alone was, it said in the Book of Enoch, taught to us by Semyaza as the
Mhm.
and it's said it was for the purpose of enchantments as well. So it's not just to attract a partner or
Right. I
to
think you
evoke.
have to be careful.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you can't look like a fully different person. I think that's
no,
a level where you're like, and it's just not, you're not supposed to do that. Like, it's
yeah,
one thing to put on a little bit of eyeshadow, but it's, you know, you see people that get crazy with it, and you're always, I'm just like, whoa, you know, and I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one. Like, we're raised now that you can't have that reaction, but you still do. You just hide it better. Like, we just have gotten great at, like, okay, they're doing them, like, oh, ignore. But we secretly, first thing that goes off in your brain, whoa,
yeah. Well,
like green hair, blue hair, whoa, you
I
know.
just quickly got the passage up here and I'll read it out to you from the Book of Enoch. But it says here, you know, sorry if I just can get the right verse. I don't want to. So and they taught them in charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant and they bare giants whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, The giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against the birds, and the beast, and the reptiles, and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. And Azazel taught men to make swords, and knives, and shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets, and ornaments, and the use of antimony. Now, a lot of people don't know what that means,
Mm,
antimony, but it's actually a very particular type of metal amalgam, which I thought was interesting. It says here, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and the colouring of tinctures. And there arose much godliness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings. Armoros, the resolving of enchantments, and it goes on to say all the other things about, all the terrible things they taught them. And it says, as men perished, they
mhm,
cried, and their cry went up to heaven. Now, antimony is an interesting one here. The use of
mhm,
antimony, that particular thing is a heavy ingredient in old makeup, and is actually still used today by the ancestor
mm.
spirit worship tribes to white up the face. Okay,
Ah,
it's a metal lead based paint for the face, and they call it kohl, Kohl. And kohl is still used today by many ancestor spirit worship tribes in these ancient, remote, various places of rainforests in
right.
the plains and stuff. They still use antimony as the
And
method of
they
painting it.
use, like, urine or something to color their hair
Oh,
red and weird stuff,
all sorts of
like
things, whatever they can get their hands
yeah.
on through nature. But antimony, this particular metal compound, which is used in metallurgy and in makeup, is used specifically not only to create an eyeliner which is black, but it has a
Mm,
shining property to it which they distill, which creates a white effect. And it's still used in the
mm,
makeup today of the tribes who use the methods of makeup to channel entities. So I
that's
believe
wild.
this method
Yeah,
was taught to mankind that the makeup isn't just for
absolutely.
sexual purposes. It's to
No.
use makeup as a tool for the sake of enchantments to summon and channel demons. So
Well,
they
because
you
if
know.
you look at the people that do it the most too in a tribe, like if you look at the olden days, it's the medicine men.
Mhm,
It's the people that are really, into, the healers, whatever, and what did they do? They channeled oftentimes for this purpose. It's fascinating to me
mhm.
because there's no way they're just doing it to be Lady Gaga. Let's get real. Like that's not happening. And they talk about it. Every one of them talk about it. Like, I mean, this isn't just me and you talking about the Bible. There's in Native American tribes that talk about somebody coming down and taking their women and getting them pregnant and causing Aztec children, like these
Mhm.
weird, children that were special. And I'm like, what? Like indigo children, excuse me, indigo
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's interesting because it's blue too. And like the colorfulness, that's where I think a lot of religions at first were really funny about color, especially red. Red was like and still in some Mormon, different things, nope. If they are, the polygamous sex, you cannot wear red and they cannot wear bold colors. They have to wear pastels.
Mhm.
It's a thing. Or like plain browns or whatever. But
Interesting.
not
Interesting.
yeah, they still do that. And I think Mennonite is the same, and the Amish. And so many of these people, I think, still remember it's gotta like you said, it's gotta be ingrained in there somewhere from something, right?
No, you're
It
right.
just
Yeah.
didn't pop out of the, sky.
Well,
I
I said a
mean,
lot of what we have are echoes of these ancient rituals and these ancient cultures and these traditions all around the world where they dress like a thing to channel the thing. And yeah, we can see echoes of this
mhm.
everywhere because it's not because this is the thing. It's not all of them are dressing like demons to channel demons. Many of especially
Right.
it's many Western cultures especially. But you do get odd
Mhm.
pockets all over the earth in every continent. They're dressing like things, and this is a complicated long word, but they're doing it in an apotropaic sense. The way they're doing it is apotropaic in nature, and that basically means I'm doing it to scare away spirits. I'm dressing like them and
Mm.
doing the rituals to ward them off and to offer protection against them. And trying to
Right.
confuse the spirits into thinking I'm one of them so they leave me alone, that type of thing. And there's
Mm.
many interpretations as to why they would dress this way and ward them away. I'm jingling my bells dressed like a hairy big wild teeth monster, to scare away all the bad spirits before winter, before I fast. And it's kind of
Mhm.
this worldview of apotropaic cultures doesn't make sense compared to all these other cultures who are purposely dressing in the exact same way because they want to bring them in. So who's right? They can't both be
Right.
right. Okay, one cannot be doing one thing for one reason, and therefore this person's doing the same thing for another reason. They can't, but they are antithetical to each other. Either you're dressing like it and attracting spirits, or you dress like
Right.
spirits to scare them away. Which one's working? And I think it's
Hmm.
more than evident that those who believe they're scaring away spirits are just fooled. They're literally just being
Right.
tricked, and actually, while they believe they're pushing entities away, they're just bringing more and more and more onto their culture and into their cultures and lives and communities, under the illusion that they're scaring them away. And
Right.
I,
Who knows which way? Yeah.
I'm
Who
pretty
knows?
I'm
I mean,
pretty I'm pretty positive it's the possession way, because there's evidence that the possession works. So you have shamans, as you were mentioning earlier.
yeah.
Most shamans do dress in psychedelic patterned clothing, similar to clowns, and they often
Mhm.
wear a hat, very similar to the top hat of Solomon and the Ringmaster. Hat's a wizard hat with a point and a big wide brim. And most shamans who wear
Mhm.
these hats, their job is to intercede with the spirits on behalf of the communities, to be a channel for the spirits. So they act and do they take the right drugs, they wear the right clothes, they sing the right chants and play the right songs so they can channel the spirits into them. And once they've channeled the
Mhm.
spirit into them, they have to give evidence that they have genuinely got a real ancestor spirit communicating through them, using their vocal cords to communicate with the tribe. And to prove this, they would often stab themselves or cut
Mm.
themselves or something and wouldn't bleed. And that's the evidence that I am genuinely possessed right now. Nothing can harm me. I'm invincible while the demon's in me. Do you get what I mean? And
Yeah.
they,
No, I get that.
they will tell you, we dress this way to channel the ancestors. And it
Wow.
works. So it's kind of, I don't believe for a
Woo.
second these other cultures who are claiming to dress like things to scare them away are doing anything. They are
Mm-mm.
heavily deceived, and usually a part of a religion or culture that in some way incorporates these entities into their mythos.
Polytheistic,
Yeah,
and at
exactly.
least at minimum.
Exactly,
Mhm.
and
No, I
they
agree.
believe there are good entities and bad entities that are in perpetual war with each other, and it's kind of like, no, 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 no. The only thing that's on the other side that's spiritual in nature, according to the Enochian and biblical perspective, they are all either demons, which are the offspring of angels and mixed with humans, which became demons, or they are ex-humans who corrupted themselves and became spirits. There's only
Mm.
one of the two options. There's not
Right.
good spirits out there who have your best interests at heart. If you're communicating with spirits in the astral realm and channeling spirits, they are not your
Yep,
grandma or
channeling.
granddad or mum and dad or whatever. They are not
No.
these benevolent entities who want to give you wisdoms. They are one of those two
Right.
things.
They
Uh,
don't care. It's
And that,
gonna lead you
yeah,
astray.
but they'll
Yeah.
tell you whatever you want to hear, because the goal is
Yes.
you let me in. Let me in and
Yeah.
let me use your senses to feel stuff again. Because it's explained in the
Yeah.
Bible, when a demon's cast out of somebody, it wanders in dry places. It
Yeah.
hungers and it
Yeah.
thirsts and it's desperate to satiate these hungers and these desires, but has no body to quench any of it.
Yes.
It has no senses to experience anything. So it waits for any opportunity to get back into another body. And optimally, it doesn't want that vessel
Mhm.
to know it's in there. It wants you to not
Yes.
realize you have a demon in you. Because as soon as you do, you can cast it out. You can purge yourself. You can get to know Christ and get it exercised or whatever.
Yes.
And that's not optimal for a demon. So their best bet is for you not to know that you're being possessed or
Mhm.
influenced anyway. Oppressed is a better word, or subtly influenced, because it's hard to fully take control of the human body. I don't think they have that much power. But what they can do is influence you to do stuff it
Mhm.
wants to do.
Yes.
It fancies the experience of cocaine. It wants to feel
Mhm.
that buzz. So what it will do, it'll influence you to do cocaine. And once you do
Mhm.
it, it enjoys the sensations through your senses. It like locks into them.
Yes.
It hooks itself up to your senses and feels the feelings you're feeling. That's how it works, you know.
Mhm.
And that's why people who
I
end up,
work in I
yeah,
work in mental health, and people say all the time, "I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I keep doing this. I
mhm,
don't know what's happening." And what was Jesus here doing? Half of the time he was here, he was casting evil things out of people. And then we've just let that go. And, we wonder what's wrong with society. Well, figure it out.
mhm. Well,
It's
more and more
it's
people are
sad.
dressing like clowns, whether they are doing it by a choice or it
Mhm.
just seems to be the spirits within them manifesting more visually into the physical realm. But you can see the spirit within people simply by the way they dress. Sadly,
Right.
it comes through, it spills out into the physical through things like that, you know. And I implore anybody who's communicating with these jester spirits, thinking they are their friends or something, just please look into it because they are not your friends.
Yes.
They do not
They
have
are
your
not.
best. You are a means to an end to them, and once they're done
Yes.
with you, once you're no longer useful, they will kill
Yep.
you. They will let you die.
Yep.
They do not care about you at all. Not
Mm-mm.
even like a little bit.
No.
Like you said,
No.
you're like an ant to these things. They consider
Mhm.
themselves gods above you. They used to rule over humanity like kings and gods, and now they are
Mhm.
nothing. Now they have nothing and they hate you. They hate what you have.
Yes.
They hate your God given gift of salvation and your body and your ability to feel and experience and have life. This realm we are in currently is the prize. This is where it's
Yeah.
all happening. This is creation that's meant to be lived. This is the experience they
Mhm.
want to have, and they cannot have it because they do not have bodies anymore. And I think this is where other
Right.
agendas come into play, like transhumanism and AI. They're
Yeah.
trying to build a
Yeah.
vessel for these entities to come back into our realm because our
Yeah.
bodies
Yeah.
are not optimal. They're hard to
Yes.
control. They're gooey and thick and weird and complicated, and we can't fully control them because they have another thing in there, like our
Mhm.
soul fighting with it. And at any moment, the vessel can find Christ and cast us out. That's not great. So let's get people
Mm-mm.
to build robotic bodies for us and a robotic brain that's close to a human's through AI algorithms, all intertwined into this weird biomechanical synth basis. Put that brain in a robotic body, and now you have a vessel that can house consciousness, our consciousness, and then
Right.
they'll go straight into them, and there you go. They've got invincible,
Right.
immortal, godlike bodies, just like they used to in the past. And the Nephilim have now returned, but in a new cyber robot overlord form
Right.
or something. You know what I mean? So,
Right,
oh, yeah.
exactly. No, it's true, and, I'll kind of wrap up on this, but, this is fascinating, but that is my whole, spiel about, and we'll go into it on a different one, I don't wanna fully open it, but about Joseph Smith is he said he saw an angel, and it was an angel of light, but it is no different than any other, channeled religion, which there are many. I mean, Muhammad saw Gabriel. He had fits of darkness, would wake up, tell, his people, because they were non-written people, all about it. They memorized it. Joseph Smith said he saw not only one angel, but dead people. And it was upwards of 26 apparitions and or dead people that he saw while he was doing this work for the church, the new coming church. But also Crowley did the same thing with Awas and wrote the Book of the Law, which
Hmm.
became Thelema. And this is my whole context is I found multiple sigils that belonged to Joseph and his family that were calling down specific angels, and I had no idea what they meant. And it put me into a realm of studying the occult, which I would have never done. I mean, it just wasn't on my ever list to do. That sounds scary. And God put it on my heart, and it ran right into John D. And John D is the father of channeling these things. So it's fascinating, and I think it will make 100% sense with the way you see things as well when we talk again, because
Hmm.
I don't wanna keep you all day. I've had you for 2 hours, but this has been great, and this is, like, I think these are the things that people really need to know, because I never wanted to be a podcaster, and I never wanted to do this, and I never asked for any of that knowledge. All I asked for was, "What did I do so I can fix it?" Because I knew something had happened in the temple with this whole secret society channeling weird stuff. I knew something happened there because I had enough Christ in me to know. And I just wanted to know what the heck I did. And that's what I asked. And then this whole thing opened up and I went, whoa. And I even said, I just don't know what I need to do. God help me. And sure enough, you might get your answer.
Mm.
So that's what happens when you ask. I don't know how you got roped in, but
It's actually in the exact same way. At the end of my psychedelic tripping phase of my life, which lasted from the age of 17 through to like 23, I was doing heavy amounts of all of these things, trying to find answers to the spiritual questions I had, and I tried to look for the
right,
answers through these drugs and through Eastern philosophies of the Tao and listening to gurus and philosophers like Terence McKenna and Alan Watts, trying to get to the bottom of
right.
what does it mean to be a human and to think, and what do these other realms give to us, and who are these other entities, and what's going on here. And at the end of all that exploration and a heavy addiction to cannabis for 8 years on top of that, and all these other things I'd done
Mhm.
in between, I was at the end of my brain basically, and I had nothing left to give in terms of thought or energy, and all my synapses were burnt out and useless basically. I didn't know what was going
Right.
on. I had no direction in life. My life had significantly gotten worse, and I found no answers exploring for that kind of spirituality. And what I thought was giving me enlightenment was only killing me some more slowly. And I realized in
Mm.
hindsight that that was the point, that was the plan. But at my lowest moment, I did just ask God, okay, God, so if you're real, then if this is the truth, if the truth is your stuff, show me,
Mhm.
show me. I'm
Show
yours.
me.
I'm yours. I give up. I can't do this on my own anymore.
Yeah.
I thought I was God and I could figure all the answers to my own gnosis or something, but it's like I can't do it. I cannot do it. Like I need help. Any that day, my life changed. I have been sober since. I can think clearly and live clearly. My life has significantly gotten better each year, financially and relationship wise. I'm now married with a beautiful child, and a beautiful wife, and everything's just coming together in my life,
Wonderful.
and everything's stable, and all the experiences I've had since and have taught me something significant, whether it was managing a supermarket and learning how to deal with people on many different levels, and also what true encounters with evil people through the process, and narcissists and
Right.
psychopaths, and leaving that to start my own company, and then coming back onto YouTube to pick up where I left off after I got kicked off because my workplace found out all these horrible things which seemed bad,
No, I understand.
all got worked for good in the end, and here I am now with a book on the way, and like I said, a beautiful family and a community online, a cult. I've got a solid foundation and a base here, and self-sufficient and sober and clear-minded with a strong faith. It's kind of I cannot thank God enough for that day in
Yes.
March of
Yes, praise
2014 where
God.
I gave myself over to him, and just all I had to do was just I was skeptical then still, because I had
Of
this
course.
I was always bumping into the Christian perspective in my research, but I didn't want to go down that
Mhm.
route. I thought, no, the answers can't be down there. But then I would listen to
Right. It's
preachers,
too
and
easy.
I would
Yeah.
listen to some of these preachers sometimes, like Derek Prince back in the day,
I
and
love Derek
yeah,
Prince. That's
and
one of my that's he helped me one of the most.
yeah, and it's here, and
Understand.
it
Yeah.
helped me give some understanding to my spiritual experiences and the demonic attacks I was also experiencing. And
Mhm.
it's kind of, even though you can argue and to the end of the earth about theology and these people, they all played their role in
Right.
my journey then. And
Yes.
I again, when I asked God for help, I didn't believe everything fully then. I didn't know what to expect. I was just thought, okay, then go on then, show me.
Right.
And he did.
Right.
He actually did.
Right.
Ask and you'll receive
Yeah.
type of situation,
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
I
Be
can't
careful.
I can't deny that anymore. Like I could never deny that testimony because it happened to me physically, and that's how it went down. And I'm
Mhm.
just going to tell you straight, that's how it went down for me. Give it a go for yourself.
Right.
But I can't
Yep.
prove to you that that's true just because I said it worked for me. But that's just my testimony.
Right.
Take of it what you will.
Right.
Give it a go yourself is all I can offer people from that moment on. And
Yep.
but yeah,
Yep.
my story sounds very similar to yours.
Yes, I think God works, and I think sometimes, like you said, you'll go through these patches where, I mean, everything came for me after that, like literally and physically. We struggle, we suffer. I just always read the book of Job, and I just always remembered that, and I was like, well, I'm not losing all 10 kids in one day, so I'm okay because that's what happened to Job. And
Hmm.
whether or not he was restored at the end, your kids are not replaceable. Those
Hmm.
kids are not the same kids. Even though he had 10 more children, it's not the same thing. And so I always thank God that I didn't have to go through that to learn, and I always think I never would have been here. I barely knew how to use a computer. I'm not qualified, but here it is, and all I knew was I was supposed to talk about it, and so here we are. And I thank God every day, and my whole podcast is based around that. That's just the only thing I care about, really. I mean, so, and my family. I mean, as far as the podcast, but I just put God first, and like you said, He'll take you down roads you probably never thought you'd go. So, with that, I will say I am blessed and thankful to have you on, and I would love to have you come back another time, or vice versa, or however we want to do it, like a swap or whatever. But I'll explain more about Mormonism and how I got out and what happened to me, and I have a lot of pictures to kind of show people, because they really have no idea how occultic in nature it is. And every one of these things are, if you let go of your preconceived notion, like what you think you know, and really dive into what's there, you might be surprised, because even down to health, even down to our safety, like the OTO stands 6 feet apart and wear masks. So I don't know. You guys figure that one out. So with
Absolutely.
that, I will let you say one more time where people can find you. And like I said, I've been blessed to have you today. So thank you again.
Sure. So you can find me on YouTube under Understanding Conspiracy, and that's where I'm based. You'll find me on other platforms like Rumble and Odyssey, but they're just backup channels where I don't really interact. But all my work does get backed up on there, just as a fail-safe.
Right.
I'm on Patreon too with extra content. If anyone's interested, it's just $5 a month, and you get access to loads of stuff on there. Just backlog, fun conversations like we're having here that aren't aired live.
Yeah.
So that's
Yes.
also available. I do have a GoFundMe to help support the book project, but it used to be a pre-order system, but I have closed that now. But any
Oh,
donation there at all will get you a special thank you in the book instead. So that's still on offer.
awesome.
But other than that, yeah, you find me on YouTube. I do have my own podcast called The Truther Therapy Sessions. It's a weekly show on a
Oh,
Sunday, and you can come on as a guest, and you can
I
tell
would
me your,
love to.
and that's your chance to tell everybody your story. And I just literally sit
You
down.
bet.
I just sit down and listen, interject with a few questions here and there, but that's all the Truth Therapy sessions are. It's just a way for people who are awake to get things off their chest that they otherwise couldn't get off their chest in their day-to-day life because their family would just think they were crazy. So
Yeah,
it's that, I think people
it's
enjoy
true.
enjoy
Yes.
hearing those stories. So I'm happy for you to go on, Heidi, and share your story with
Amazing.
Mormonism. That'd be amazing. We'll get that on the books.
Absolutely.
But that's it, guys. You find me on YouTube.
Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good one. We'll see you next time. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah.